Dear class, welcome back to American National Government. Today we're looking at federalism. We'll look at the powers of Congress and presidency. Actually, we'll also look at what they do and a little bit actually about the Congress and presidency, and we'll talk about this more. But we'll also look at stages of federalism. U.S. Congress, what does it do? And what are they? Essentially, they are the legislative branch in the federal government, right? So they form laws or suggest laws and policies in the form of bills, and sometimes those become laws, and we'll look at the process. Let's look at the Congress. What is it made of? So these are elected officials. There are two houses. U.S. House of Representatives has 435 seats. This is where more people are within the Congress. The term limit for each seat is 2 years. The number of seats from any state is proportional to the population of the state relative to other states. So if you have a very populous state like California, California will have a lot more seats than Arkansas, which has much less population. So right now, California, Texas, and New York are the states with the most number of seats because their populations are the highest. States and territories are represented in the House of Representatives. So you have U.S. territories such as Guam, such as Puerto Rico. So they are represented. The U.S. Senate is much smaller, just 50 people, 2 from each state. So we have an equal number from every state. And the term limit is 6 years. So these people get to stay longer. They have less time. They have less worry when it comes to re-election issues, right? Because they can stay there for 6 years and do whatever they kind of do without having to be re-elected and be good, right? Over here, it's 2 years, which means they have to constantly answer to the electorate, right? So whoever's voting for them, they have to be super good to those people. Otherwise, they don't get reelected, right? Committees. So I suggested that Congress is in charge of legislation, which means policies, laws. So they come up with bills. So how do they come up with these bills? They don't work alone. They work within committees. Some of them are joint committees with House and Senate working together. Some of them are just House committees. Sometimes it's just Senate committees. So members of Congress are distributed among these committees. They have responsibilities. They meet, they talk about issues, and then they decide what is the best language to put into a bill that might be endorsed by others. And sometimes they just foot bills because they feel like they need to do that to see if people will actually agree to this. So they start footing bills on any issue to see how popular those issues are with the rest of the folks, right, in Congress. So let's see what else is going on. So the bills process. A bill can be proposed in any of the houses of Congress. So suppose I'm just a newly elected person in the House of Representatives. I just joined a committee and I want my voters to know that I'm already pressing for gun control. And so I'll try to pass some kind of bill. I'll probably talk to the committees I belong to, but that's how it's going to happen. And if I see a lot of A's, meaning that yes votes during the voting process, I can tell that there's some support. There's going to be a lot of nays or no's, and some people will just not be there. They don't have the time, or they decided they don't want to vote on this. Maybe they don't want to be known for voting on some kind of controversial bill or something like that. So each House members get to vote on the bill to pass the House of Representatives. The bill has to get 2/3 votes. So 2/3 of 439 have to say yes. In the Senate, 2/3 of 50 people have to say yes. If both houses say yes to a bill, what happens then? That's right. It needs to get the president's approval. Then it goes to the White House. It sits on the president's table for a while, and then he meets with his advisors. He meets with the people who are proposing the bill. He talks to others in Congress at the senior level, and then he decides on the bill, or she, right? We haven't had a female president in the US in a while, but maybe that will change. So if the president says this bill is not good, I don't want to pass it, it's called vetoing, and the bill fails to get the approval, it goes back to Congress, but Congress can still pass the bill if it votes again and has a majority. So what is the legislative process? So it's a, very simple topic. And so you'll find many videos on it on YouTube, which are created by reliable sources. Here's one from the US Congress. I'll share the link with you all and make sure you watch it, okay? Let's go into it for 1 second. So this is what the congress.gov website with the video looks like, okay? So let's see what they say. It's 1 minute. So you can watch this in your own time. It's probably a repetitious process here. I'm going to stop it. Let's go back to our slide. For constitutional amendments, the process is slightly different. Here we are not trying to pass a bill, but we are trying to have a constitutional change, meaning the US Constitution looks a certain way and we would like to change it, okay? So here you have to get 2/3 vote in the House of Representatives and again in the Senate. And then you have to send it to the state governments, meaning the state legislatures, okay? So the state legislature is just like Congress. They usually have two houses, House of Representatives and House of the Senate, right? And so each of those have to pass. And in each, if those legislatures pass the bill, and they do this for 3/4 of 50 states, then this comes back to Congress and it is called a constitutional amendment. Essentially, the groundwork is done and then Congress just has to declare the constitutional amendment has passed, okay? And now it's official. Failed bills for constitutional amendment. Equal Rights Amendment wants equality of the sexes. So here they have a Equal Rights Amendment website. You can check it out. It's equalrightsamendment.org. Let's take a look at it for 1 second. This is what their website looks like. And it says the Equal Rights Amendment, first proposed in 1923, is an amendment to the United States Constitution that guarantees equality of rights under the law for all persons, regardless of sex. As of January 2020, the ERA has satisfied the requirements of Article 5 of the Constitution for ratification. Passage by 2/3 of each House of Congress and approval by 3/4 of the states. Leading constitutional scholars agree that the ERA is now part of the Constitution because of issues raised about its unique ratification process. The archivists of the US has not yet taken the final ministerial step of publishing the ERA in the Federal Register with certification of its ratification as the 28th Amendment. So we just have 27 amendments right now. Let's go back to the page. So this is a hotly debated amendment, and therefore I think they're stalling on it basically. So in 2020, there was a lot of resistance in southern states. However, it gained momentum. 38 states did ratify, okay? You can check American Government 3E, page 66. What are the powers of Congress? So again, American Government 3E is the book we follow in American National Government course, which is PLSC 2003. Economic policy. So powers of Congress that they can make economic policy for welfare of the people. You can tax, borrow money, regulate interstate and foreign commerce, and protect property rights. Remember that for John Locke, democracy, or rather government, the role of government is to protect property, right? Life, liberty, and property. Property is huge, and also private property, right? So this became a cornerstone of the US Constitution. Locke actually is influential in this matter, and we'll talk about it during the Locke-related lecture. Economic policy for welfare. So welfare is a term we talked about in a previous lecture on federalism, how the idea of welfare becomes a big question mark. Whose welfare, right? Okay, so the Congress can also regulate policies related to postal services, immigration, money-related issues. Generally, the Federal Reserve's bank is in charge of actual activities, but Congress can have a say. Defense. It can raise, support armies, declare war. So it can, Congress has the right to create the military, standing military, to support armies with defense funding, and to declare war. Let's look at some of the powers again. Elastic clause. So the elastic clause gives Congress certain powers. Congress can create laws or policies, etc., to enable it to fulfill its constitutional duties. It can also create institutions, agencies, whatever it needs. Commerce Clause. Commerce Clause gives Congress the right to police interstate crime and jurisdiction over interstate commerce. So it can make laws about interstate commerce, meaning between New York and New Jersey, or New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So in between two states, right? The do's and don'ts of Congress. This page is a little bit messed up, but let's take a look at it just to see what
this brilliant device keeps your home cool in summer, even during heat waves and power outages. It's small.
All right, so take a look here. And I'm not going to talk about this either. I want you to do that because let's keep the flow of the lecture going. But I will link it and you can take a look at it. So one of the things that Congress and the federal government cannot do is infringe on the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is considered it's like giving a protection to the individuals in the US, right? So you create federal government to create a strong central government, rather to create a strong union. And then we talked about separation of powers. But the goal of the US Constitution and forming this, new country was to make sure that individuals had rights as well, right? And so the 10 amendments to the US Constitution, the first 10 are the Bill of Rights, and they restrict government powers with respect to individuals. So this is the federal government's power being restricted, but you will see that state governments also have to follow this rule. So let's take a look. States actually had problems with limiting, with these voting rights being expanded, rather, right? Because the 10 amendments and other amendments and also, the congressional acts expanded voting rights because a lot of people were not considered citizens before the 1960s. And so they didn't have voting rights. And their voting rights may have existed, but they were not enforced. So we'll look at that. So states actually had a lot of states in the South, I would say, had a lot of problem when the federal government passed Amendment 13, 14, and 15, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other acts, and we'll look at those. So the federal government has trouble with gun control bills for the same reason. Congress cannot really do much to amend this Second Amendment, right? The Second Amendment is the bill that gives you the right to bear arms, right? And people have proposed many, many bills, like probably hundreds of bills, maybe thousands, trying to amend these kinds of bills where something is already a Bill of Right protection, right? And it's very difficult to do. All right. So who protects your rights? As I said, the Bill of Rights is like, it's this stuff that you cannot touch, right? At the same time, if you looked at the era of segregation, people did not really respect the Bill of Rights of freed slaves and their descendants, of ethnic minorities, or of women, right? So it's like the Bill of Rights is treated like sacred when you want to amend it, but at the same time, a lot of people just did not respect other people's rights. So 13, 14, and 15 amendments, these are important because the Bill of Rights existed for the male white property owning minority for a long time, right? Women didn't have the right to vote. Free slaves didn't have the right to vote. Those had to be introduced. People also didn't have equal protection under the law. You could be a free person, but you would not have equal protection under the law. So there were forms of racial discrimination within the government, right? And so these issues became the main reason for the civil rights movement. Even though we have legal protection under the law, those are not being enforced by the government. And sometimes it is a state government that is not enforcing it because of many issues, and we'll look at that. So the federal government passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ends segregation in the South and Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws are like laws that apply only to Black people, right? To create barriers for equal protection under the law, equal access to resources, etc. Marriage Equality Act. So this is one that protects different kinds of marriages, who can marry, who has the right to marry, things like that. Let's look at something else. So Civil Rights Act, there's videos here, you can look online, look at what happened, and then let's look at some other things. So here you have the other limits. So we talked about the 14th Amendment and equal protection. So the Bill of Rights has particular bills, okay? So you have Bill of Rights and amendments 5 to 7 protect you. And I think even 8 protects you in courts of law. But they were not being enforced for everybody. So you had to have the 14th Amendment to make sure that everybody is protected equally under the law. Okay, so writ of habeas corpus means that you are protected by certain steps within the criminal justice system. And so you should look up the Bill of Rights for those amendments to understand this in more detail. Again, within those amendments, there's protection for other things. So look at that. Stages of federalism. So I'm going to stop the video here. Let's come back and talk about federalism.